I think it's really important that we take a day of rest. I think God, who founded the world, didn't need rest, and yet he took a day of rest after he did creation, and I think he was a good example to us to take a day of rest. And that is enshrined in our rules, in our Constitution, where it says accepting Sunday in our very early documents as a nation.
Oh, this threw me for a loop. Accepting Sunday? Where is that in the early documents of the United States? Well, it's not ACCEPTING, it's EXCEPT. Accept Sunday. So this is what I found. The U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 7 says, this is the most well-known reference to Sunday. It says, if any bill shall not be returned by the president within 10 days, Sunday exempted, after it shall be presented to him. This means not to count Sunday because most people went to church on Sunday. But is that the right day according to the Bible? If we are putting 10 commandments inside our classrooms, our schools, number one, which commandments are we doing? She answered it because the fourth one is the Sabbath, which is talking about Saturday, since the Jewish Saturday is the same as man's Saturday. According to Genesis, this idea of worship on the seventh day came about before sin. And the Jews were not anywhere around. And so according to Jesus Christ, the Sabbath was made for man, not for the Jews, because he would have had a perfect opportunity to insert that in there if it was. This is a fascinating conversation that I think we should dive into. So I'm going to play this real quick and we'll listen to this together. And by the way, if you wonder what's going on behind me back here, we're setting up a new studio. That's why I haven't been live for the last couple of days. We're moving to a new area. And I've also been doing these camp meetings and also preaching at different churches around the nation. So I haven't had time to really get into doing live shows on Sunday. That's why we've been missing it. But I hope you have been enjoying these pre-recorded testimonies. So let's watch this real quick, and I'll show you exactly what's going on.
Does the gentlelady yield for some questions?
Well, the lady yields for questions. The lady yields.
Thank you, Representative Noble. What is the fourth commandment?
Are you referring to my to the way it's written in the bill?
Yes.
Okay, right.
There you go. Remember the Sabbath.
Keep the Sabbath.
It's being here on Saturday.
It's about us being here on Saturday. Is that ironic or what?
So what does it mean to keep the Sabbath holy?
Well, I think it's, you want to get into theology here? I'd love to, if you'd like to. I think it's really important that we take a day of rest. I think God, who founded the world, didn't need rest, and yet he took a day of rest after he did creation, and I think he was a good example to us to take a day of rest. And that is enshrined in our rules, in our Constitution, where it says accepting Sunday in our very early documents as a nation.
And so part of keeping the Sabbath holy is not working on the Sabbath?
That is, yeah.
And what is
a day of rest.
The Ten Commandments come from Judaism. What day is the Jewish Sabbath?
It is on Saturday.
And what day is it today?
It is Saturday.
Sunday, the day that Jesus rose from the dead, is this the day that Christ said that we should honor? And I think it's great that people do honor this day and that Christ rose from the dead. That is the whole reason we have eternal life, that he, number one, was faithful until death, but number two, rose from the dead to come and save us again. But from the very beginning, did God say that he wanted us to worship him on a Sunday? If you look back in history, you'll notice that many people were trying to get the pagans to come in as Christians. In 321 AD, when Constantine was deciding, hey, I think Christianity is probably a good thing, he decided that everybody should be Christian and legislated Christianity. This was right after the oppression of the Christians. And so Satan, the adversary of Christ, instructed that we are no longer against, but we will infiltrate Christianity. Does that mean everyone that worships on Sunday is bad? No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. Does that mean everyone that is pushing this idea of having more God in the classrooms is necessarily bad? No, I think it's a rather good thing. The idea, though, is Satan is a subtle foe, and he's going to very carefully institute a way to break the commandments of God. When he does that, that fulfills Revelation 13. That goes against the commandments of God. Because it says in Revelation 14, here is the patience of the saints. Here are they who keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus Christ. That means the saints are the ones who keep the commandments, which are the 10 commandments found in Exodus. This was the original covenant that we can't keep on our own, but have to have God place into our hearts that we might be able to keep it. Revelation 14:12 says, here's the patience of the saints. Here are they who keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. Having the faith of Jesus and keeping the commandments. These are the same commandments that were given in Exodus. Exodus 20. They are the covenant that we could not keep. And that was shown because they immediately broke the covenant when they had the golden calf made and started worshiping it. God said, I will put in better covenant with them. I will make one with better promises that they might be able to keep it. I will put it inside their hearts. In other words, we can't in and of ourselves do works in order to praise God and keep God's way, his law of love. But we can have that relationship with God that changes our hearts. Not that we have done anything, but God works on the physical machine of us while we're still alive. That's the miracle that's happening, the change of heart, and that provides that peace that passes all understanding. Even the Old Testament, at the end of the Old Testament, it says that here is the whole duty of man, to keep the commandments of God. This is why Paul talks about the importance of keeping the commandments over and over and over again by subtly introducing the idea that we should keep the commandments and then having maybe lots of strife happen in the world. We say, well, maybe we should get back to God. Maybe we should legislate rules. Maybe we should make the Pope the guy who decides all this stuff. Maybe we should come together under a new world order. Could it be? Well, let's listen to the rest of the conversation and find out what comes next.
Here we are.
The Christian Sabbath is what day?
Sunday, in honor of the day that Jesus rose from the dead.
And we're scheduled to give this bill a final vote on what day of the week?
It's ironic, isn't it?
Would you be willing to postpone your bill so that we're not breaking the 10 Commandments by working on the Jewish or Christian Sabbath?
I love that you said that, because if we had not had your point of order the other day, we would have actually already completed that.
And so, Representative Noble, you're saying that you'd rather tell people to follow the 10 Commandments than follow it yourself?
I would have rather have had this bill passed the other day when it was time. And you know, that's really sad that we are under such a crunch in time now with the end of session. Our Texas forefathers only gave us 160 days to pass bills, and that's where we are in this session.
We as a legislature are
140,
about to force,
I'm sorry, correction.
We as a legislature are about to force every teacher in the state to post the 10 Commandments in their classrooms.
If they are donated.
Do members of the Texas legislature follow the 10 Commandments?
Is that about the bill?
Your bill is about the 10 Commandments.
Yes, it
I'm
is.
asking, do members of this legislature follow the 10 Commandments?
So again, this bill is about honoring our historical, educational, and judicial heritage with the displaying of the 10 Commandments.
The 9th commandment is, thou shalt not bear false witness. Are you aware of any legislators who have lied about anything?
That is, you know, there might be one coming up in a minute if you keep talking. We'll see.
The 7th commandment is, thou shalt not commit adultery.
Yes?
Do you think that members of the legislature should focus more on trying to follow the 10 Commandments rather than telling others to follow them?
Maybe they didn't have them posted.
I am, it is incumbent on all of us to follow God's law, and I think that we would be better off if we did.
That's a great segue into my next question, which is, do you think our public schools are missing God?
Again, we are talking about historically what our founding fathers believed. I have a lot of quotes from our founding fathers if you want me to go there, and I would love to do that if you would like me to.
Well, you just mentioned God's law, so I was just asking if you think our public schools are missing.
Our public schools are missing God's law, but you can't force someone or put something up on the wall to make something happen like that. Would it be a good reminder that we are under God's law? Yeah, but you can't change someone's heart this way. What I found very disturbing, though, is how she said this is how the government was run from the very beginning.
Again, we are talking about historically what our founding fathers believed.
Let me give you a little history on that real quick. The First Amendment in 1791 says Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion or prohibiting their free exercise thereof. That hasn't been introduced yet. That hasn't even been talked about. Although that is something that Trump says he wants to kind of get rid of, which is fascinating to me.
They say separation between church and state, they told me. I said, all right, let's forget about that for one time. We said, really, the separation? I don't know. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'm not sure.
But this clearly forbids the government from establishing religion or saying that we have to do one type of exercise or another. Thomas Jefferson, 1802. In this letter to the Danbury Baptists, Jefferson emphasized a wall of separation between church and state. This wall is to separate the government from interfering with the church. It does not prevent the church from saying things about the government. What the government established to do that was 501c3s or nonprofit entities that state if you talk against the government, we'll just revoke your nonprofit rights and you'll have to pay us taxes. Number 3, James Madison, 1785. Madison wrote, "The religion can only be directed by reason and conviction, not by force or violence. Who does not see that the same authority which can establish Christianity may establish with the same ease any religion?" The government can make rules with what the last 6 commandments are in the 10 commandments, which establish what man is going to do with other men. How we love our neighbor, in other words. But the first 4 commandments are the ones that are reserved for God, and he needs to take care of, not the government. Man doesn't get to decide what God's laws for God are. And number 4, finally, the Pilgrims. Many early settlers, like the Pilgrims, fled Europe specifically to escape religious oppression under the state churches, especially the Catholic Church and Anglican Church. The founders learned from history and wanted to ensure no religious group could use government power to persecute others and them when they came over here. This is why this is so important. When you see people in the government establishing rules, not just with the 10 Commandments, but also talking about how important it is to keep Sunday, well, you got to wonder just how close we are to the end of time, because establishing and breaking the rules is what sin is. And that's exactly what this whole debate is between God and Satan, whether or not creation can keep God's rules. And God said, no, you can't, but you can with a relationship with me. Not that you're doing it, but that I'm doing it through you. So what is sin? Well, sin is the transgression of the law. The transgression of the law, what law? The law established in Exodus as the covenant between God and man. The one that he said, I will put a new heart in him. The one that says that he will put those laws in your heart and establish it on new promises that you may follow and not sin again. 1 John talks a lot about this. I believe 1 John chapter 2. And so when you see these things come upon the world, you got to ask yourself, how close are we to the end of time? We're very close. We're in the very toenails of time. We're starting to see spiritualism come out more and more. We're starting to see Sunday worship become out more and more. We're starting to see presidents and councils come out and be heavily Catholic and pushing the ideas that we should have laws of God and worship in our schools. How close are we to the end of time? And why isn't any other entity talking about this? If you want to stay up to date on what's going on, not only just in the spiritualism of stuff that's happening in this world, also Sunday worship, anything that has anything to do with a big word called eschatology, we're going to talk about on this channel because this is the new normal that's coming. It's going to be a strange normal. Stick around and subscribe.
Do you think that seeing the Ten Commandments in a classroom might make a student feel closer to God?
Again, that is not the focus of this bill. The focus of this bill is to look at what is historically important to our nation, both educationally and judicially. But if you would like to look through some of those textbooks that are on my desk, you will see the foundation that our forefathers used when they learned to read and write.
In the committee hearing for this bill, you said that students should see the Ten Commandments in their classroom and remember, quote, God is watching. Is that correct?
What?
In the committee hearing for this bill, you said that students should see the Ten Commandments in their classroom and remember, quote, God is watching.
I do not recall that.
You said it in response to a question from Representative Bryant in the Public Education Committee. You don't recall that?
No, obviously you do, though. That was like 4:30 in the morning.
Okay.
We were all pretty sleep deprived. I don't remember in what response that was, if indeed that was a response. I do, however, believe.
The lady's time has expired.
All right, pay no attention to the fact that my ears are lowered and that I have a different color shirt on. It has been a wild week. In fact, we got requests to come out to Moline, Illinois. If you are nearby, you should come out Saturday, 11 a.m. and I think around 2:30 or 3, I'll be doing a presentation there. Spur of the moment. And so it happened just by accident because someone couldn't show up and they said, you know what, we know someone that can talk about this stuff from a biblical worldview. And so we're not going to have a show at our typical time on Sunday this week because, man, I can't complete it all. But I did want to comment on that thing just a little bit. I think it's very interesting what is going on here. And when she says things like,
you will see the foundation that our forefathers used when they learned to read and write.
The foundation that our forefathers used when they learned to read and write, I think she's trying to say that, you know what, there is some importance to the Ten Commandments, which she's right. The trouble where she's getting stuck on is the Sunday thing, the worship thing. You can't mandate that, and you can't remind people in a polite way and with real teeth someday what those commandments are. So I thought I'd dig into what this guy who is questioning her, who's all about. Is he religious? Is he an atheist? Is he just mad at the religious world? Or does he have a point? Pay attention to this because I think this is one of the most interesting points of this whole video is that it's easy to get caught up in demonizing one person just because of what they believe. And instead of realizing they might have a point, all of a sudden, I am totally for what this guy is doing.
I've been going to the same church since I was 2 years old, and now I'm in seminary studying to become a minister myself one day. My faith means more to me than anything. I agree with what some of my Republican colleagues said yesterday. Faith is not just a private matter. I speak very openly about my faith in public. My faith is the reason I'm in public service. I believe we need more conversations about faith and morality in our society, not fewer. There is a spiritual crisis in our world that must be addressed, but this bill is not the way to address it. The separation of church and state doesn't just protect the state, it also protects the church. But every session we pass bills that erode this sacred boundary.
Every session we pass bills that erodes this sacred boundary. This guy sees what's going on. That's what's amazing. And he's pointing down the barrel of what they're doing and eroding the idea of separation of church and state. We have this in place for a reason, and that's to prevent religion from being pressed down people's throats
as a way to force them to do something that might not be exactly what is true. Understand? And that's what's coming at the end. We see a government-forced religious movement in Revelation 13. This guy knows what's going on.
Replacing school counselors with untrained chaplains, using tax dollars to fund private Christian schools, teaching Christian Bible stories to our youngest, most impressionable students. And just yesterday, letting public school teachers use their authority to encourage students to pray. And now this bill, a bill to mandate the Ten Commandments in every classroom.
Sounds all good, right? It sounds like, having the Ten Commandments in every classroom, maybe having everyone follow some Christian loving rules. Or is it? Or does it come from a place that he describes now?
I think all these bills come from a place of fear. We're worried that people aren't coming to church like they used to. I share that fear. On Sunday mornings, I look across my church and I see a lot of gray hair. And I worry about the future of our church. But I firmly and passionately believe this is not the way to get people back to church. This is a power play. By using our power as legislators to elevate our faith tradition over all the rest, that's the kind of stuff that gives us Christians a bad name. Instead of living out the way of Jesus, we're imposing our beliefs on other people by force. Instead of leading by example, we're leading by mandate.
This guy is speaking my language. Instead of leading by example, we're leading by mandate. We're forcing other people to do things. This is why he was saying, shouldn't you guys be focusing on doing the stuff of the commandments, not forcing others to do it? Should we be a Christian nation? Should we call ourselves a Christian nation? I don't know if we should necessarily, because that would mean that we are enabling the idea that we should force Christianity on other people. Or be allowed to, I guess. That's the danger. When you get too far into the idea that we are this or we are that ideology, you tend to think, well, you can't be a part of us unless you are like a certain way. Our nation's not like that, because our nation has to force rules upon people. And if we say we are one thing or are another thing, then we impose rules to make it that way. And that's not God's way, because God's way is not a way of force. It's a way of love that doesn't force. Because you know what forced love is? Rape.
If the goal of this bill is to create a whole new generation of Christians, I think this bill will do the opposite. I think this bill will create a whole new generation of atheists who think our religion is more about power than love. I love the Ten Commandments. I've tried to build my life on the Ten Commandments. But what does it mean to truly live out those Ten Commandments? The Apostle Paul wrote in Romans 13, the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and whatever other command there may be, are summed up in this one command. Love your neighbor as yourself.
I love that verse. I use that all the time to show that whenever someone says, well, the commandments are just whatever Jesus said. No. Whenever God says the commandments, he means the commandments that he mentions. Paul is talking about, which are the 10 commandments given at Sinai. Yes, they can be summed up in love. That's the whole point. That's actually what the Old Testament said. It can be summed up in love. But that doesn't negate everything else that define love, which is the 10 Commandments. That doesn't do away with the 10 Commandments just because they do define love. That doesn't mean we get to define love our own way, because throwing away those 10 Commandments means that we get to decide what true love is. No. The 10 Commandments still stand. It's just that they also define true love.
Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. The Hindu student who sits in a classroom is our neighbor. The Buddhist student who sits in a classroom is our neighbor. The Sikh student who sits in a classroom is our neighbor. The atheist student who sits in a classroom is our neighbor. And we are called to love them as ourselves. But if this bill passes, we're going to put a poster on the wall of that classroom that says, "Thou shalt not worship any god before me." We're putting up a poster that says their religion is inferior. We're putting up a poster that says their faith is not welcome here.
This is so hard because it is true that there are religions out there that are inferior. There are religions out there that are incorrect. And we should be very careful about what we decide to say about them, because some of them are downright selfish and impose ideas of getting to heaven through works-based scenarios or nirvana or however you want to call it, which people can never achieve. And so when you can't achieve those things, how can you say that your God and my God are even similar? They're not. My God came and found me and will bring me back to heaven someday, all because he loves me. He loves everybody, but if we're not in compliant with that, which we can only do through Christ, having that relationship with Christ daily, then we can be with him someday. But other religions are like, you know what, I know a way to God, and that way to God is through works-based scenarios. I must do enough. I must say enough confessions. I must walk enough stairs. I must whip myself on the back enough. I must bleed enough. I must do good things enough so that I'm weighed in the balances and successfully achieve something. That's not how it works. You will never find God that way. But does that mean we should put up rules and say, look, by the way, the Christian God we believe is absolutely correct in this institution? I think everybody should take a step back and think about this for a second. Because if we go ahead with these subtle changes in society, it might just stop us from actually reaching out and talking about this stuff. People might just say, well, look, this is the society we live in. This school, this department, whatever it is a Christian-only department. So I'm not even going to say anything. I'm going to keep my religion to myself, and then we just don't talk about it. We put up fences between each other. Let's open the discussion. Let's talk about this a little more. What do you think? I want to hear what you think in the comments below. And meanwhile, let's continue.
It's hard to be different as a kid. I bet each of you remembers a time that you felt left out, a time when you didn't fit in. We've all experienced that. It's the loneliest feeling in the world. It's why so many of Jesus' teachings are about outsiders and outcasts, neighbors who don't fit in. Forcing our religion onto Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh, and atheist students is not love. Forcing teachers to put up a poster in their classrooms against their wills is not love. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Love is the fulfillment of the law.
I understand what he's trying to say. He's trying to say that the commandments are no longer, they don't exist. There's no need for them, so we don't need to put them up because love has fulfilled the law. But how do you define love without the law of God? You can't. Because the true love is obeying your family, bringing honor to your parents, not lying, not stealing, not dishonoring them, loving your wife, loving your God in a way that isn't committing adultery. Even God said in the Bible that Israel committed adultery on him. how do you have a bunch of intelligences? Let's call them artificial intelligences, even though you can kind of use them synonymously. If you just put a bunch of artificial intelligences into a computer and then say, "Hey, figure out what love is," they would all come up with their own ideas of what love is. Same with humanity. The only thing we can come up with is, well, if it doesn't make us feel bad. But feelings isn't what this is based on either. It's based on duty in real life. Things that make us feel different. So, the commandments are true love. But they have to come through an understanding on our own in order to figure that out. Because if we don't, then everyone's going to feel oppressed, and they're not going to even want to care or even seek and understand the truth found in Christianity. It's a very difficult discussion to have. Maybe there's a better way to say it and you know it. Type it below. Let's listen to the very ending of this.
I'm voting no on this bill, not despite my faith, but because of it. I'm voting no on this bill out of love for the Ten Commandments, out of love for the Constitution, and out of love for our neighbors. And I humbly ask you to do the same.
Boy, we're in for it, folks. This is just the beginning of the rumblings that are happening. Everything from spiritualism is happening right now to Saturday is being brought up as a worship issue. You can't step back and go, oh, this has happened before. It might have happened before, but we are on the cusp of something right now. In the next few years, something is rumbling. We have huge volcanoes erupting in Hawaii again, shooting things 100 feet in the air. Has that happened before? Absolutely. But has all this at the same time happened? That's what really gets me. Something big is happening, folks. And if you want to stay tuned, we're going to cover all that on this channel. And we also appreciate you joining our Patreon. Patreon.com/strangenormal. We'll see you soon.